Hello and welcome to our Exile podcast series. Today we are focusing on a powerful topic: how partnerships between higher education institutions and NGOs supports refugee students, with a special lens on gender-related challenges and empowerment. We are joined by two incredible guests. Jasmine, a member of a Belgian NGO called Collectif des Femmes, that supports male and female refugee students, especially in their academic journey. Amankai, also from the same NGO, who will tell us more about the gender-related aspects of refugee support. So let's start with you, Jasmine. Can you tell us a bit about your organization and the kind of support you offer to refugee students?
Alors, notre ASBL accompagne les étudiants en exil qui souhaitent poursuivre ou qui souhaitent reprendre un parcours académique.
Our NGO supports students in exile who want to continue or restart their academic journey in Belgium. In practice, we help them in several areas, like finding housing, accessing food aid, and navigating administrative procedures for diploma recognition. And we also assist with finding student jobs. We organize group activities too, which help refugee students meet local residents in Louvain-la-Neuve. It's all about building social connections and reducing isolation. And finally, for those who can't pursue their studies, we work with them on reorienting towards other professional or training projects.
Projets de formation.
Okay, and how do you collaborate with universities and university colleges to make sure refugee students can access and succeed in higher education?
Alors, nos partenariats avec les universités reposent vraiment
Well, our
surtout sur la
partnership with
complémentarité.
universities are really based on complementarity. So the university provides an academic framework, but a lot of essential needs aren't covered by these institutions. That's where we come in with personalized support that focuses on daily life. We also collaborate with the university's social and educational services to help with procedures and guide students to the right contacts. This cooperation ensures a kind of continuity of support from enrollment all the way to social and academic
Jusqu'à cette
integration.
intégration sociale et académique.
Mhm. And that's interesting. But what are some of the biggest challenges these students face when trying to start or to resume their studies?
Alors, il y a beaucoup de défis. Premièrement, la reconnaissance des diplômes.
There's
et,
quite a
et
few
la-
challenges. First, diploma recognition and how slow the equivalency process can be. Then there are major financial difficulties, finding affordable housing, covering daily expenses, and again, the housing search itself. Language barriers and adapting to a new academic system are also big hurdles. And very importantly, social isolation. Arriving in a new
Très
environment
important,
without a
l'isolement
network
social,
can be
parce
really
qu'arriver dans un
tough.
nouvel environnement sans réseau, ça peut être très compliqué.
Okay. And in your view, what's the impact of this kind of support on students' academic and social integration?
Alors, il y a plusieurs impacts.
There are
mais ils sont
several impacts, and they are all concrete and very positive on different levels. Academically, students get through the administrative steps faster, so they can focus on their courses much sooner. Socially, the group activities we offer and the networks they build help strengthen their sense of belonging and reduce isolation. And practically, access to housing, food aid, and student jobs really helps stabilize their daily lives. But for us, every individual success story is proof of how important this kind of holistic support really
de
is.
l'importance de cet accompagnement global.
Thank you, Jasmine. And turning to you, Amankai, with a focus on gender-sensitive support. So tell me, what specific challenges do refugee women face in academic settings, and why is it important not to overlook them?
Ok, hay que decir que las mujeres en desplazamiento, las mujeres refugiadas, pueden sufrir también violencias de género en el país donde llegan. En este caso estamos hablando
We
de
have to say that
Bélgica.
women on the move,
Lo que
refugee
nosotros
women, can also experience gender-based violence in the country they arrive in. In this case, we're talking about Belgium. What we've noticed is some of the women we support, students, they go through gender-based violence, and it's not just that. There are different kinds of exploitation, and once they're here, they face other types of violence, like administrative violence, verbal violence, because we also have to say that a woman who arrive, just like men, but here we're talking specifically about women, they come to a country where there's racism and there's violence, and administrative violence is often not even seen as violence. So what does administrative violence mean? It's when we go to the commune and they don't give us paper. When we go to a public center for social welfare and all the doors are closed. When we go to a university and maybe they don't let us access a program because they say our diploma isn't valid, even though it might be valid. If an organization like the Women's Collective, where I work, steps in, then suddenly the doors open. And that's institutional violence, which is often minimized. People say it's not violence, it's just administrative stuff. But we have proof that when we accompany men and women, in this case refugees who want to enter university, and we go through the whole process with them, things change. When we support someone through the Public Center for Social Welfare process, so they can get funding, because one of the biggest issues is getting financial support as a refugee, we see how the doors open. Because yes, there's Public Center for Social Welfare help, but doing a 2-year degree, a master's, is often seen as unnecessary. It's quicker and easy for the person to just stop working. And we see how things open up administratively, how we can get access to all the information about diploma equivalency, etc. And we have to say that as women, on top of that, we face even more difficulties. Just because we're women, we'll have less access than men. But even more so if we're migrant women or refugee women. And we can say that every layer, what we call intersectionality, adds more violence. We can see that there are different barriers, especially because women students often carry the full burden of the family. When a woman arrives in Belgium with a family, 3 kids, 2 kids, even 1, who takes on the responsibility? The woman. The house, the childcare, the school, the parent meetings, maybe sports if the kids do that. It's no one else but the woman who takes on that load. And that's another difficulty, another barrier. Another barrier is language, the linguistic challenge. And depending on the country they're from, there's also cultural barriers. For example, depending on religion or culture, some women wear a veil. And in some places in Belgium, they're not allowed to wear it, or it becomes a problem when they're trying to access a job, and so on. So for women, and here we're talking about refugee women who want to enter university or higher education, there are clearly many barriers. And one of the first, as I said, is violence. Second, the family burden. The kids finding time to study. And third, the linguistic and cultural barriers.
Segundo, la sobrecarga a nivel familiar de los niños, poder tener tiempo para estudiar. Y la otra cosa también es barreras lingüísticas y culturales.
So practically, what kind of gender-sensitive initiatives has your NGO implemented to address these issues? What can you do on a daily basis?
Bueno, primero el colectivo de mujeres, mi colega tal vez lo explicó.
Well, first of all, the Women's Collective, my colleague also mentioned it. The Women's Collective was created by migrant women. 46 years ago, 3 migrant women, who were the wives of university staff, so part of the academic system, were fighting for and asking for a space where they could also exist. So from the beginning, the Women's Collective has had that experience working with women, migrant women in particular, and especially women who wanted to study. They wanted, just like their husband, to be able to study something. Maybe at university, maybe at a higher education school, or even just learn French. What the collective offers, first of all, are French courses. We have 6 French classes running at the same time, with 3 or 4 different levels. We go up to B1 here. So there are many different French courses, and we also have literacy courses. That's usually not the main audience, but there are women who started with literacy, and I know women who, thanks to those classes, went on to do higher education studies too. It's a process. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we offer activities to help women build confidence, what we call empowerment. Courses and activities where women can grow and realize that they exist, that they have skills, that they can do things too. We also provide support to those women so they can get information about where they leave their kids, what to do with them, and about childcare. If I'm pregnant, I need to book a spot in a crèche, like they say here. That's where they take care of little kids, 8 months in advance. How school works, we try to help this woman to ease the burden they carry at home with the kids. And with that, we also create spaces for dialogue, safe spaces where women can talk about their problems. If they're victim of violence, we support them too. So besides the French courses, the Women's Collective offers safe spaces for women to speak. We provide close support. We go with them to the Public Center for Social Welfare, to the university, to different places to make access easier. And on top of that, the collective also offers computer classes to help women, especially migrant women, catch up and access digital tools and fill in the gaps they might have had from coming abroad. We also provide access to mental health support. We have 2 psychologists here who offer free help, and we also work in Brussels with psychologists and mental health centers like Centre Exil and Méridien. We make it easier for people to get mental health support, which is really, really important.
Méridien, tenemos facilidades para que las personas puedan entrar para una ayuda de salud mental, que es muy, muy importante.
Okay, lots of things happening there. So how can universities and university colleges better integrate gender awareness into their refugee support programs?
A ver, eso es súper interesante porque hace algunos meses atrás tuve una pequeña reunión con
that's super interesting
la
because a few months ago I had a small
de la
meeting with
universidad,
someone
en
from
este caso
the
la
university,
UCL,
UCL Louvain in this case, who's in charge of the Access to University program. And we're actually talking about the gender dimension, which isn't really integrated into universities, and it's something really worth having. First of all, I think it's important that the people working on those kinds of projects, because UCL Louvain has this Access to University project, which is a preparatory year for refugees and people seeking asylum or international protection to help them access university. It's a transition year where they get support. But we were talking about this gender issue, like the topic of women and the specific challenges they face, and it isn't really included. And I keep coming back to the same point. First, I think the people responsible and those working with those groups need training. Actually, I think everyone in the university should get training, especially training on gender-based violence, so they understand how it works. And just because we're women doesn't mean we're automatically sensitive to violence or to women's issues, especially migrant women's issues. And in this case, we're talking about migrant women. So first, I think the university needs to work with a protocol for preventing violence, gender-based violence, and violence within the academic and university setting. But also for women who come with experiences of violence from home. What can be done? How can we help? Because we have to say it, refugee women often don't have family here, no friends, the network is really small. There's no network. And that's one of the things the collective strives to do, build a network. When you arrive here as a migrant, as a refugee migrant, with all the difficulties that come with the migration journey, and especially because being a refugee means I didn't choose to migrate, it was a decision made by a government, by a situation, by a war that forced me to leave. And usually I left part of my family, my people behind. And when you get here, you arrive without references, without a structure to help you with your kids, for example. If I have problems with my husband, where do I go? Where can I talk? So for me, the university needs to be the first set up a protocol for violence, what in French they call mettre en place. So that if a woman is a victim of violence and she's in a program like Access to University, or even in a regular academic program, and especially if she's a migrant woman, a refugee woman, there's something in place. That's the first thing. Second, the training I mentioned before. Third, the university also needs to adapt its schedules and other things for women with children. For example, some classes start at 8:30, but school for the kids starts at 8:40. And people often say, well, they could have put the kid in daycare, but it's not that easy. First, it's expensive, and second, there aren't always spots available. So for me, one of the important things the university could do is set up a university daycare center for small children so that women can also have access to education. Because one of the biggest barriers is, okay, my child is 1 year old. Where is my child? Where do I put them if I don't have a spot? So we talked with the university about having places where student mothers can leave their children and access their studies freely. And where there could also be a daycare at a low cost so women can continue with their classes with group courses, etc. Thanks to the university. Another thing we talked about earlier is academic flexibility, so that women can have more flexibility, maybe leave earlier or as I said, leave later. And the big issue is that sometimes the schedules are 8 or 10 hours long, but women also have to do other administrative tasks that aren't taken into account. And like I said, the burden of the household is huge. And another thing we asked the university about is housing. For example, on this university campus, there's very little housing. And after a certain time, people don't have access or there's just no access to housing. What we're asking for is more access, especially for migrant people who have more difficulty finding housing. Even if it's in university housing outside the campus, we're asking the university to guarantee a quota so that migrant students can access cheaper university housing. That's what we talked about with the university.
Barato. Eso es lo que hemos hablado con la universidad.
And so you are in relation with that university, but have you seen any progress or shifts in how institutions respond to gender-related needs in recent years? Is there an evolution?
Sí. Primero ya en sí haber podido tener la reunión.
Yes.
Para
First of all,
ver
just being
cómo,
able to have the meeting to see how we can apply gender lens, how to actually install that gender lens in the programs, and how to really see and listen to the difficulties we face as an echo of what women tell us. Because everything I'm telling you, Karine, are difficulties that women share with us, things they live through, or that we've lived ourselves as migrant students. Refugee women tell us how hard it is to continue their studies. Many of them sign up, they enroll, but they don't finish. Usually the husband finishes, and maybe they don't. And Karine, there are women, doctors, who are doing cleaning jobs, what's called housekeeping, or technicien surface, which sounds nicer, but they're still cleaning. And these are women who are doctors, dentists, lawyers. Just recently, a refugee woman from Colombia told me she's a lawyer in her country, but she can't continue her studies here because she has 2 kids and has to work. Her husband is trying to study now to get his diploma recognized. It'll take him 2 more years because they didn't give him full equivalence. So she sacrifices herself, she cleans so he can move forward. So that's just the fact that universities are starting to look at that and reflect on gender-related challenges and the realities of migrant women. That already feels like a big step forward. Because before, there wasn't any openness to that. Secondly, at the European level, there's a lot of work being done with universities, and the EU actually requires universities to work on gender perspectives. It's not enforced, but there's a push to work on it. But often we talk about gender perspectives without including the perspective of migrant women, and that's where our experience comes in. Being able to meet and share a vision as migrant and exiled women is incredibly important. Another thing, like I always say, is that there's more awareness now about violence, gender-based violence, and the different types of violence women can face. First, we need to recognize that there's constant violence against women in many forms, and a university should also recognize that and be interested in understanding the types of violence that exist and how to address them within the university setting. Because one of the things we see is that there's a lot of exclusion, for example, when migrant students trying to join group work. That's also a form of violence, complete exclusion. And it's even harder when you're a woman trying to integrate into group work. So I'm not just speaking generally about women, but specifically about migrant students. I hear a lot of feedback and women say it's even more difficult. So that's one thing. And second, I see that little by little, there's some effort to work on student equality. At least there's a discourse around it. But there's still a long way to go to truly integrate students, and in this case, women in exile, into academic equality.
De los estudiantes, se trata, al menos hay un discurso de trabajar sobre la igualdad de los estudiantes, pero falta mucho para lograr integrar los estudiantes, y en este caso las mujeres de exilio, a una igualdad a nivel académico.
Okay. Gracias, Anakay.
De nada.
Thank you to both of our guests for participating in this conversation and reminding us that education is not just about access. It's also, and among other things, about dignity, inclusion, and empowerment. Partnerships between higher education institutions and NGOs are more than logistical collaborations. They're lifelines for students navigating complex realities, especially for women facing compound challenges. Thanks for listening, and to learn more, go to www.exile-project.org and explore other episodes of our podcast series as we continue exploring stories of resilience and transformation.